We'll go ahead and get started here. So for today, we're going to be talking about how to fill out purchase agreements. Just so I know, either comment or if you want to turn your camera on and let me know who has written a purchase agreement so far. Pull up the chat box here. I can wait, guys. There we go. Heather, I have. Shanita said I have not. What about Kaylee or Brandon? I have not filled one out. Perfect. You guys can unmute yourself too. This will be a little bit more interactive today. If you're familiar with my coaching style, I like to be able to interact with everyone. And that way it makes it a little bit more fun and a little bit more enjoyable for everyone. And you can learn a little bit more. So quick intro onto my background and what I've done. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm a real estate agent here at Keller Williams. I've been a licensed agent now for 16 years. In the last 12 months, we did a little over $10 million in real estate. Excuse me. We own a lot of, my wife and I own a lot of investment properties, and also I'm the productivity coach here. So purchase agreements are one of my favorite topics for everyone. And the reason is with purchase agreements, are they an intimidating form? Let me ask that. So some of you have, some of you have not. Are you intimidated by filling these forms out? You can go ahead and type it in chat or unmute yourself. Oh, looks like Kaylee's back. So Heather said at first they are. Absolutely.
I guess I wouldn't know where to start.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. I appreciate the observation. Many of us, I work with a lot of new agents, and agents, when we get licensed, we're all excited. We got our license, we're all set to go. And then that shocking moment, a buyer comes to us and goes, "Hey, Eric, I really like this house. I want to make an offer." And then that agent panics. Now, I always tell my coaching clients, it's my job not to throw the ball for you as your coach. It's my job to make sure that when that moment comes that you need to throw the ball, that you can. And that metaphor transfers into real estate, making sure that you know how to fill out a purchase agreement. So how do we do that? We practice it. So I want everyone to type in, and I will wait for everyone's comment here. Tell me on a scale of 0 to 10, how well you know purchase agreements. If you're at 0, that's okay. If you're at 10, I'd like to doubt it. I don't feel that I'm at a 10. But give me your number. 0 meaning you don't know it at all. 10 meaning you could recite it without looking at it. Addenda, good to see you. 4. Heather, 7, great. We're waiting on, is it Kaylee or Kylie? It's probably Kaylee. Kaylee and Shanita and Brandon. So Shanita's at
It's actually Shantina.
Can you say that one more time for me?
Shantina.
Shantina?
Yes.
Perfect. I appreciate you letting me know. I always like to make sure I'm saying names correctly. Shantina. Very good. So perfect. Let's go ahead and jump in now. We're going to go back to these numbers. Now, Brandon and Shantina, we're going to be able to get you up drastically in Addenda as well. Heather, I'm hoping I can get you up from like a 7 to an 8, maybe even a 7 to a 9. But we're all looking to learn something today. One of my mentors always says, never go into an argument or a dispute showing or proving that you're right. Look for where you are wrong. And while in classes and sessions, I try and do that as well. Look for where we are wrong and what we don't know. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here so that we can all walk through a purchase agreement. By the way, if you have a printer, print off one of these purchase agreements. And what a lot of my coaching clients do is they'll take a purchase agreement in paper. I actually had, in case anybody showed up today, I had a bunch printed off. But you can actually have like a master list. So that way, when you are sitting down with your buyer, you can re-reference, wait, did Eric say that we needed 30 days, 50 days, 90 days? What should we do here? So anyways, if not, if you're just taking notes in writing, what we'll do is you'll see numbers at the side of this list here. You can go ahead and fill in, hey, line 42 should be plus 45 days. Line 86 is plus 10, whatever. I'm making up numbers. Don't write those down, but you get my point. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Get into our dot loop forms here. And we are ready to go. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can see it. Perfect. I appreciate everyone turning on their cameras. It makes teaching more fun and hopefully a little bit more relevant and impactful for everyone. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump in. Pretty simple, we would think, our first line, right? A buyer name. Yet, a buyer name could be, we could have, Eric Uchbar. We could have Eric J. Uchbar. We could have Eric James Uchbar. Does my name have an E-R-I-C, E-R-I-C-K, E-R-I-C-H? I've watched it spelled all three ways in the last 24 hours, actually. It's E-R-I-C. So the point is, when we are making these purchase agreements, we want to you can write in there, confirm names with the buyer. Something else, a common question we get is, Eric, we've got only one person taking a loan, but we've got, a married couple that wants to take the name. You can do that. The only time you cannot is if you have both husband and wife taking the loan and you're only getting, and the buyer only wants one name on the deed. That will not work. The bank will say, whoever's on that note, you need at least them on the deed, but you can add more people if you want. By the way, you probably remember this from school, but if somebody is married, it only takes one to buy, but it takes both to sell. So something to keep in mind. So on the listing agreement and on the purchase agreement, when you're selling a house, even if it's only in one buyer's name, both parties need to sign if they are married. Anyways, one other quick note before we get started. One of the common challenges we are seeing today in this challenging market is we're watching agents pushing through these contracts because they're writing 3, 4, 5, 6 purchase agreements with a buyer. And what they'll do is they'll just dot loop them to their client. They'll say, hey, we probably don't have a shot at this, but let's go ahead and get this offer out. We'll see what happens. It's 8 o'clock at night. I want to watch a movie or something. I'm just going to send it off to my client. They'll click right through it and, we'll shoot it out. Even if your client is willing to sign something, they need to understand what they're signing. Take 5 minutes, walk through the entire agreement with them, break it down and go over it. And I'll tell you where there are some mistakes that will happen and lessons I've learned over the years myself and lessons I've learned being a productivity coach, because when problems arise, guess who they call? They usually are calling me, so I can help spot those challenges. Last note before we get started, normally my coaching style is get out there, just don't worry about messing things up and move forward. This is not the coaching style I have for a purchase agreement. You have to be very careful. 5 minutes of being proactive and learning and thinking through the purchase agreement will save you hours and possibly your license and possibly a lot of money just by filling out and checking the right boxes. I'll share some stories about what I've learned over the years and some crazy stories that we've had. So anyways, let's keep moving through here. Property description, pretty simple. Go ahead and write in the address. Parcel number, pretty simple. Go ahead and fill in the parcel number. Does everyone know where to find the parcel number? If we don't, I will pull up the MLS real quick. So if we go to a hot sheet, we'll go to something in Euclid. This is your parcel number. Whoa, what happened there? This is your parcel number, the 714290, where it says parcel ID. If you click on that, it takes you to what we call the real list. It is important that you fill in seller information. This is the seller information. A lot of people go, well, Eric, I only represent the buyer. Well, still on the agency disclosure, you still, if you're a good agent, are going to fill in the other client's information. Now, we don't assign signatures to the other client, but if there's a seller designated, we have to write their name in. Anyways, that's where you put the parcel number. Very important. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see. Lines 4 through 11. I've memorized those because I talk to my clients all the time. I will send over the purchase agreement to them, and I'll say, Mr. Buyer, can you confirm that I have your name correct? Can you, the address is obviously correct. I looked up the parcel, we're correct. But Mr. Buyer, we've talked about a lot of homes. We've offered on a lot of homes. We've talked about this one. You were at an open house with and you met the seller in the driveway, whatever. It doesn't matter what was stated. It doesn't matter what the MLS has. It matters what's on this purchase agreement. So Mr. Seller, can you confirm lines 4 through 11 have all the correct items? One lesson that I learned over the years was I had a property that I was listing and I had an attorney as a seller. Now that attorney that I had ended up having an air conditioner, no air conditioning in the house. He was flipping the house, he sold it. The other agent thought they would just go ahead and check off air conditioning right here. And that meant that the house now came with air conditioning. That is not how you request items if you want the seller to install them. Now, me being naive and younger in the business, I said, who knows a purchase agreement, me or an attorney? Who knows it better? An attorney does, right? Yet, who knows the practicality and how a purchase agreement actually rolls out more, a real estate agent or an attorney? A realtor does, right? So I should not have just forwarded it off to him and said, hey, you're an attorney, you can review this. I should have gone through and said, hey, check lines 4 through 11 like I do for every other client. Now, there was no central air conditioning there. We got 2 days prior to closing, and all of a sudden the agent goes, well, what do you mean there's no air conditioning here? We have to be careful of what's checked. Now, also, if you are asking for something in the home that's not currently there, like adding air conditioning, remember, this says buyer accepts its as it is present physical condition and shall include the land, all appurtenant rights, privileges and easements, and all buildings and fixtures, including such of the following that are now on the property. So by checking this, that does not automatically just say, we get it. It's only the things that are currently on the property at the time of making the offer. Something else you do not want to do, write in also included. I've watched agents just write in all appliances. Do not do that because I don't know what all appliances are there the day I was there, right? So be very careful with that. Also, garage door remotes. Ask the other agent, do you have 2 garage door remotes, 5 garage door remotes? How many does your client want? Don't just write in all. Number 12, also included. What do you write in here? Pretty simple. You just write in that the client wants, I don't know, maybe they want the backyard grill. They want the patio furniture. They want to make sure that the pool equipment stays. Now, one thing that you do have to be careful of, you'll want to check with the lender if you start getting into higher dollar items, because if they foreclose on the house, they cannot grab the furniture, right? So if this is affecting the offer price, and that's going to be judged by the lender, if you start writing in there that the new Corvette in the garage comes with the house, that will not fly with the lender. The lender is going to say, we will not loan on that. That's not part of the property. That's affecting the price, so that has to come out of the contract. Not included, almost as important as what is included, that big oil drum in the backyard, the stack of old tires that your client does not want. So when I'm going through this purchase agreement, I'm, asking, hey, Mr. Buyer, hey, Mrs. Seller, Mrs. Buyer, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you've seen the house. Is there anything that you want removed? Because now is your time to ask. Once we go under contract, there's no ability for me to go back and say, hey, we need to change something in here. Now, the next item here is, it is or is not a secondary offer. A secondary offer, I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. I would recommend reading this through 3 or 4 times, but a secondary offer is where you have a primary contract on a house, and then another agent makes an offer that if the first deal falls apart, it automatically rolls into the second deal. It's something that I am doing, and I literally just got one accepted on a $500,000 house yesterday as a secondary offer. My client lost out the first position. It looks like we missed by about $5,000. And the seller said, well, hey, we'll take yours as a backup. And that way the seller doesn't put it back to market. And my buyer, if it does go back, they're not going through that whole mess of trying to go in multiple offers and lose sleep because they don't know if they have the house or not. It just automatically, we get a phone call. Hey, Eric, the first buyer backed out. House is all yours. Perfect. Now, this date states what's important is it's a secondary agreement through this date, meaning that your client is under contract. They should not be buying another house unless they're okay with buying multiple homes until this contract date is up. So you have to ask your client, how long are you willing to wait to be in second position? I mean, if your client's not going to wait a year, right, and not buy another house. So you only want to give them maybe 2 or 4 weeks in here, but ask your client how much they like it and how much they're willing to not look at other homes while this one potentially is going through the process of getting a loan and home inspections and all of that. Perfect. I'm going to pause right here on line 20. Do we have any questions so far? Very good. All right, let's keep moving forward. Purchase price, pretty simple. Go ahead and write in the purchase price. I don't think we have to go over that. Earnest money. Actually, one quick note in today's crazy market on purchase price, make sure that first digit is correct. We had an agent not too long ago on a $350,000 house make a crazy low offer, or what they told their agent to make an offer at $250,000. That agent accidentally wrote $350,000. Think about that, $100,000 difference. They accidentally just sent it over. They did not call the client and go through the purchase agreement. Like I said, that would have been caught. They sent it over to the other realtor and they said, hey, just so you know, I don't think we're going to get this together, but I wanted to put it in writing for you. And that agent responded like, what are you talking about? It's a full price offer. Of course we'll take this. Went under contract. And then that agent had to deal with telling their client, sorry, we wrote an offer for an extra $100,000. Take your time on these purchase agreements, right? Pretty much everywhere else in the real estate business, I'm going to tell you, go ahead, go make mistakes, go do what you need to, figure out the best way to lead generate, but this is not that. This is the exact opposite. We've got to cross our T's and dot our I's. Go over it with the client. And when I present it to the client, I tell them, hey, I may have made some mistakes here. I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. That's why we do this. So before we send it out, we are 100% correct. Sound good, Mr. Buyer? And they go, yes. Perfect. Earnest money. You can write in that line, 1% minimum 1,000. 1% minimum 1,000. So if we're writing an offer for $200,000, we're writing 2,000. If we're writing an offer for $80,000, we want to put in there 1,000 because 1% is 800, but we want a minimum to be about 1,000. What's required by the state? 0. You don't need anything. Some things we are doing, and I caution you on doing this, but an offer I just wrote last week, we actually wrote a $30,000 non-refundable earnest money check. Your client really has to understand what that means. And I don't always recommend that, but that's a way to get a seller's interest, because if your client is saying $30,000 in earnest money, that is, that's quite a bit. That's going to make that seller feel a lot more comfortable that you are a serious buyer. But again, your client has to know, normally earnest money goes back to a buyer if the deal falls apart. But if a client sees, or a seller sees 30 grand, will they go to court for it? Possibly, if they think that they're right. And they cannot release that money unless, number one, buyer and seller agree specifically in writing where that goes on a form called a mutual release. Number two is going to be a court order, or number three, ideally the deal closes and the money is part of the buyer's down payment and transfers to the seller. Very good. I always check note to be payable within 4 days. You can do a note as well, and it has to be redeemed within 4 days. What I like to do with earnest money is just get the title company right now. If you use GM Title, you go right on their website and your client can just make the payment online. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but I want you to think your clients are usually at work. They can only meet you at the bank between 12 and 1. You got to run out to the other side of the city to pick up a check. Then you got to go deliver it to the title company in person. I mean, it could be 3 or 4 hours worth of time, plus you're responsible for a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 check to make it there. Why do that? Just go to GM Title, tell your client, here's where you make the deposit, and it's there, done. No questions asked. Mortgage loan to be paid by the buyer. So let's go ahead and fill this out, what this looks like. Let's say we're doing a $100,000 house. So we've got 100,000. Let's say our earnest money, our buyer is going to go a little bit high on the earnest money of 20,000. If they're putting 20% down, here's $18,000, and then the remaining balance would be 80,000. So understand that you want to add these two together as part of the down payment. This is cash down payment to be deposited, but remember, earnest money is part of your down payment. So these two get added together. So you got 100, 2, 18, and 80. Now, in this circumstance, how much money is the buyer going to pay out of pocket at close? Most people would just add these two numbers together and say 20,000. That is not correct. What else does a buyer have to pay? Go ahead and unmute yourself or type it in the chat box.
Closing costs.
Closing costs.
Thank you. Yes, closing costs. This happens very often when we have 3.5% down buyers on this house. They go, well, I've got $3,500 in the bank. I'm good to go, Eric. And I say, not quite. You're going to need to understand that you're probably going to need $7,000 to $8,000 to come to close with. One other quick note, it's not on the purchase agreement detailed like this, but it's something you should know. What are the 3 things a buyer pays for at the signing of a contract or within the first week of signing a contract? We already mentioned one.
Title insurance.
Not quite. Love the guess.
They're gonna pay for inspection.
Home
What- oh, you
inspection.
mean-
There you go.
You
So
mean
home
at the
inspection is
closing?
one. Home inspection is about $450 today.
Okay.
What else? Number 2, what's this? Earnest money, right? And number 3 is going to be loan app or an appraisal fee. So make sure that you have that note noted somewhere when you're talking to your client. You can say, hey, just be aware in the first week, you've got to pay your earnest money, your home inspection, and the appraisal if they're getting a loan and if they're getting an inspection. By the way, loan apps are about $450, $500. Very good. All right. So financing. Right here, you want, I see this often incorrect. I see people put 3-5, right? Like this. That means that I cannot make a loan application before 3 days and I can't make it after 5. That is not what I say when I say 3 to 5. I am saying put either 3 or 5. Why would I put 3 or 5? If I'm writing a contract tomorrow, is a buyer going to make a loan application on Saturday or Sunday? They will not. So I want to put in 5 here, and that's from the acceptance date. So if I'm negotiating even today, if I write an offer today, is it going to be accepted today? Probably not. It's probably going to go till tomorrow. So I need to be thinking through tomorrow as the acceptance date. So I would put 5 days in there. Also think about holidays. If I'm writing this on a Thursday and if I'm writing this on a Wednesday and Thursday's Christmas Eve, a buyer's not making a loan application until next Monday. So you might have to go longer. Here, this is loan commitment. Very often we hear clients, you'll present an offer and you'll say the loan commitment date is this. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I got a pre-approval. A pre-approval and a loan commitment are 2 completely different things. A pre-approval is a lender just looking generally at a client, pulling their credit score and saying, hey, this is about what you owe. This is about what you can afford, but we haven't checked with the IRS. We haven't gone into your bank accounts. We haven't looked at every single thing. We don't have an appraisal on the property. So what this allows is the contract contingency finance contingency kicks in, and you're allowed to have through whatever date you put in here. This is usually 30 to 40 days. Now, we do not write in here 30 to 40. We write in an actual date. So today is June 24th. So I would put in here somewhere around July 24th. But let's be honest, July 24th is a Saturday. I'm not going to have the bank call me on a Saturday. So I'm going to go to the following date on the 26th. Very good. This is also something that I hear quite often incorrectly done. Closing. I wish they would not put this word closing in the contract. I still, after 16 years, don't know what a client means when they say they are closing, or another realtor. So stay away from the word closing. We have 3 different dates that we're going to focus on. Line 43 is what we call funds and docs. What that means is that's when the buyer has to put all of their funds in place. So their down payment, they've already had their earnest money in, and then they sign all of their documents. For this date, I would put TT -2, right? This is for your notes, TT -2. What is TT? That's title transfer. Why do we want the title transfer date to be a couple days, the funds and docs date a couple days before title transfer? The reason is the title company has all of your buyer documents, right? They need to get all of this signed by your buyer. And then there's all these seller documents that another closing agent's going to sign. So these forms all have to go together. Then they take those forms and bring them down to the county. Now, if you're signing the day of title transfer, that title company's got to get potentially 4 or 5 different people together, get all of these documents signed in the morning, and then get somebody to rush it down to the county the same day. Now, do you think a title company is just taking one document to the title company, or are they going to gather up everything for that county in the day at one time and take one trip, right? So if you miss that trip, then all of a sudden your house isn't filing. Now you got moving trucks in the driveway. You got a seller upset. They can't close on their house, and possibly another house that somebody's contingent upon that house selling. It's a mess. So make sure you give yourself a 2-day grace period here for funds and docs. The next date we have here is title transfer. That is what we're talking about. Now, title transfer is usually about 30 to 45 days out. So you can put 30 to 45 days. And again, you pick a specific date here. So right now we're on June 24th. I'm going to call the lender and say, hey, Mr. Lender, we really need this house to close by the 26th. Will that work? Or possibly that lender might say, hey, you got a unique loan we really need through August 12th, right? I always pull up that calendar right here. You just click this button and you can use the calendar. It's nice because that way you can actually pick an actual date and you can see what days are weekdays and weekends. Always make sure that title transfer is on a weekday. Technically, funds and docs don't need to be a weekday, and technically possession doesn't need to be a weekday. Normally, possession happens on or before 6 p.m., 0 days after recording the deed, and I normally put that the same day as title transfer. There are certain circumstances where I may change that date, and we can make our offer look a little bit better to a seller if we say, hey, we'll give you, our title transfer is on 8/12. We're actually going to give you through 8/20. And Mr. Seller, you can go ahead and live in the house for free for a week and a day. So if your client wants to do that, you can do that. Just understand that now is allowing the seller to live in a home. There's a lot of lawsuits that come from doing this because the seller doesn't leave the house on time because their new home isn't ready or whatever. Now you have a tenant landlord situation. And potentially that owner could have lived in that house for the last 10, 15 years. And now they're getting evicted from their own home because they didn't follow the rules. So I recommend against that. There's also sometimes where a buyer needs to move in early. So you could have early occupancy. We've got 8/12 here. Maybe your buyer wants to move in on the 4th. Understand that there's also challenges that can happen. Your buyer moves into the house and then there's a problem with their loan. And all of a sudden the last minute or the buyer gets sick and doesn't have a job anymore or something. Now they're living in somebody else's house and we don't have a rental agreement signed or anything like that. So there are forms to use specifically for both of those situations. Make sure if you're doing that, reach out to me first or reach out to an agent you know and just confirm that you're filling those forms out correctly. But it's called buyer occupancy prior to title transfer or seller occupancy post title transfer. You can use either one of those. Very good. Title instructions. Pretty simple. You're going to check off GM title. That's our associate title company. If there's another title company that your client wants to use, you would check that off there. Prorations. I could spend a whole hour session on how to calculate prorations. We're not going to go into that. More or less what that means is if there's an HOA fee, let's say there's an HOA fee of $365 a year, and you're 30 days into the year, you're filing on, February 1st, then there would be a credit due from the seller to the buyer in the amount of $30, because part of that from the buyer to the seller for $30, because the seller only used $30 of their $365 payment. So that's what prorations are. Normally that's mainly on taxes, but it also deals with HOA. It also deals with in here, it actually talks about rents. If you are selling a rental property and there are rents and you're halfway through the month, then half of the rent that was already paid goes to the new owner, right? So that will be credited at closing in prorations. Escrow agent shall withhold $200 is the common area for a water hold. So line 70 is 200 typically. You could go higher, you could go lower. A property with a well is 0. But what that does is if there is a water bill on the property of, a balance of $150, that holds the seller accountable to pay that. And the reason being is the illuminating company in Dominion, all gas, electric, all of that actually follows your personal social security number. Water, though, follows a parcel number. So if we're going to get clear title, we don't care what happens with the gas and electric, right? That's all on the buyer or the seller's social security number. We do care what's on our parcel number of the property we're buying, so that holds them accountable. One recommendation, if you do see a vacant house or something that it looks like a seller may have been in financial difficulty, we're seeing this more and more often, especially with this forbearance challenge coming up. There may be some people with $800 water bills. If there's $800 and you only write $200 in here, you're going to have some challenges. So be very careful of that. You can ask or actually put it in writing, seller to provide current water bill, prior to title transfer. Very good. CAUV tax, I always check off whoever is not my client. This is an agricultural tax normally due with, this normally is associated with farming. Rarely are we selling farms here, but if you are, call the county and see who's, how much the CAUV tax is, and make sure that your client understands whoever's paying for it and how much it is. Charges and escrow instructions. So your seller may ask you at some point, hey, Eric, I'm curious. What do you normally, what's the normal title company fees? What do I pay for? And you hear this general term called closing costs used all the time. And there are so many different costs when we're closing on a property. We have to understand specifically what these are. So you can tell a seller client, Mr. Seller, you are responsible for line 75. Seller shall pay the following costs through escrow: real estate transfer tax. B, any amount required to discharge any mortgage, lien, or encumbrance not assumed by the buyer. C, title exam and 1/2 the cost of the insurance premium for the owner's fee title insurance policy. D is prorations due to the buyer. E, broker's commissions. F, 1/2 the escrow. And then G, other. So this is where if you wanted your client to let's say you're representing a buyer, you should technically write in here, seller to pay $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs is what you write. There's not enough room for it. But you can also, let me scroll down here. Sorry, we jumped there. Something else that I think is wise to do. We were on page 2, I'm sorry. So right here, you can just say C line, I think it's 14. And if you just want, you go up here to line 14 and you can write in seller to pay up to $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs, points, and or prepaids. That's the exact term you need to use when when a buyer wants their closing costs paid by the seller. Now, a lot of times we'll ask a buyer, hey, do you want the seller to pay your closing costs? And a lot of times buyers are going, sure, I'd love to have that. Of course, that sounds great. Well, keep in mind, as soon as that goes there, all of a sudden we are really offering 95 on this house. We're not offering 100,000 anymore. Also, what I do when I'm doing this, I am very clear with clients because I don't assume the other agent reads my contracts carefully. I highlight somehow, or I'll put it in all capital letters that, you know, we have done that. It's really important to let the other agent know when we are typing things in a contract. When we used to handwrite them, it was really easy because you could just see what was handwritten, but now it's just blending in. I've watched agents do this too. You can scroll right through here. We never want to see this. I've watched agents do that. Now that's something an agent could easily just scroll right over and not pay attention to. So I'm the buyer agent, the listing agent, I send this over, I sneak that in there. Guess what, at closing, they didn't realize I put that in there. I've watched lenders on a $100,000 house run up closing costs. It was some ridiculous number years ago. It was like $75,000 or $8,000. And they like added fees in that they didn't have to have just because it wasn't capped. So you always want a specific dollar amount. Do not let a lender just tell you what the maximum amount there is, because they don't need to use usually 6%, which is what most lenders can use. So on this house, let's say I put, a lender just tells me, well, Eric, just put 6% in there. Well, if the lender only uses 4,000, my offer was reduced really down to 94,000 when it really, my client burned up $2,000 that they didn't need to use, because if that 6% is not used, guess who gets it? The seller. So we want to be very careful. Ask the lender for a specific dollar amount that they want your client to put in there. All right, buyer shall pay the following through escrow. So again, here's line 75 is what the seller pays. Line 82 is what the buyer pays, right? Now here's our $199 admin fee. Our $199 on the seller side is attached to our listing agreement. So make sure they're aware that they pay our commission plus $199. On the buyer side, they're just paying the $199 to work with us. Pretty simple here when we talk about the limited home warranty. I don't know why this thing keeps clicking and going all the way up. I apologize. Line 87, buyer will or will not be provided a home warranty. I recommend re-referencing the MLS. Look at the MLS and see if there's a home warranty offered. It's paid or will not be provided from ABC company, right? ABC home warranty. If there is a home warranty offered, call the other agent and ask who they're using. Now, if you're on your own buyer side, we have our own company, APHW, that's going to go ahead and do it for us. So you just type in APHW, you look up on the form how much that is. That's also another form in DocuSign. It's usually about $420. You write that in there and you're all set to go. And then make sure you write in here, is the seller paying for it or is the buyer paying for it? If the offer, or if the MLS is offering it already, that's a seller paid. If not, it's the buyer. This is a very confused line down here. I want you to write this in your notes. Listing is seller, selling is buyer. I'll repeat that. Listing is seller, selling is buyer. I have to even slow down when I say it. So what we want to make sure is there's what's called closing disclosures. ALTA statements is what they're known for. They used to be known as HUD statements. And that shows where exactly every dollar goes from the buyer and the seller. It's very private and confidential information, yet normally our clients want us to review that document in case there's a problem. There's usually 100 different things on that form, and we want to make sure that earnest money is in there. We want to make sure that if there's a septic escrow hold, that's in there. We want to make sure that the prorations are correct, that taxes are prorated correctly, all of that. So we want the seller's executed closing disclosures to be viewed by the listing broker. The buyer hereby authorizes the final copy of the buyer's executed closing disclosures to the selling broker. Remember, selling is buyer, listing is seller. Very good. Let's go ahead and go through inspections. So typically we've got yeses and nos, and don't forget who's paying for them. 99% of the time, it's going to be the buyer paying for any inspections. Now this one, we normally don't do 14 days for most dates here. We're normally going to be doing sorry about that. We're normally going to be doing usually 7 days. One way that I've won offers recently is even putting in a shorter period of time. If I can call the home inspector prior to the offer and just say, hey, Mr. Home Inspector, can you get there in 5 days? And I write in here 5 days or 3 days. That puts the seller in a better position because that way the seller doesn't have to take their house off the market for a week or 10 days. And you can get that home inspection done and get the house back in the market quickly. Very important. Well, we do have pest and wood destroying insects. We have lead-based paint. I normally see agents miss this. It says waiver, and agents just read waiver. No, I want inspection, so I don't want my client to sign that. That is incorrect. You need to read this. Buyer elects to waive each professional inspection to which buyer has not indicated yes. Your client always initials this. This just means that anything that they did not indicate yes here, so if they don't have anything checked or they don't have anything yes, they're waiving all the inspections that are not checked yes. So your client signs that. Now lines 143 through pretty much the end of the page here, 143 through 161. This explains what happens after the home inspection. If you're getting anything out of today, this is something that you really want to pay attention to. We have 3 days from the last inspection. That does not mean that if I have 5 days here, that's day 8. Maybe I do the home inspection on day 1. If I do the home inspection on day 1, add 3 to it. That means on day 4, I have to have what's called the removal of contingency. If I do the home inspection on day 6, add 3 days. I now I have to have the removal of contingency. If I said day 5, then day 8, and then if I do the inspection on day 6, I owe it on day 9. It does not matter if I have 30 days in here or 1 day in here. It's 3 days from the date of the inspection. By the way, radon takes 48 hours. The first call I make is the radon inspector, and I say, can you get there early? And then we'll pick it up at the home inspection, because usually the home inspector does the radon. So have them drop it off 2 days prior. That way it's ready to go on the date of the home inspection, instead of dropping it off at the home inspection and then waiting 2 days additional. I know that sounds like a minor tweak, but I promise you, your clients will love you when they have the radon results and the home inspection done, instead of going, well, geez, I'm kind of on the fence after the home inspection. Let's see what the radon looks like. And they're losing sleep for 2 days. It seems like an infinite amount of time to a buyer. Anyways, this describes, you have to write that removal of contingency. Write that down, download that form, and look at it. That removal of contingency is going to explain A, B, or C. C is right here. So A, your buyer says, remove the inspection contingency and accept the property in its as-is physical present physical condition. Option B, accept the property subject to the seller agreeing to have specific items pretty much repaired or compensated for, right? So we found mold in the attic, which, by the way, like 60% of homes have mold. It actually says in our property disclosure, every home has mold. Just some is harmful, some is not, but let your clients know that's common, and it can be remediated. But let's say the buyer says, hey, Mr. Seller, can you repair the mold, and I will buy the house once you do that. Option C, something that was not disclosed on the property disclosure. The buyer can say, I found something I don't like, I'm out of here. The house is on a sinkhole. The roof has a major leak in it. It's got to be massive things. It can't be that, hey, I've got a broken cover plate on my light switch that's 45 cents to fix. Very good. By the way, set expectations for the buyer and the seller. Buyers should know that there's usually about 30 to 50 items wrong with a house in good condition. Even new construction, I've watched home inspectors walk out with a list of 20 items on new construction homes that pass city code and all this stuff. So be very aware of that. Let's see. And by the way, sellers, they should be aware too and be prepared to spend $1,000 to $2,000 after the home inspection to do repairs. Even though it says that a buyer is going to buy it as is, I promise you the majority of the time buyers are asking for something. This is an either or up here, line 162 or 164. You do not check both of those boxes. I don't know why this thing keeps doing that. 162 or 164. So this buyer has received the EPA pamphlet and the lead-based paint disclosure. Buyer has not received them. Megan's Law, it's a little bit unique, but you've got to address with your seller. Hey, Mr. Seller, make sure if you've been notified by the sheriff's office that there is a sex offender in the area, we have to disclose that to the buyer. This does not mean that they were searching on some website for somebody in the area. This means that they were directly notified by the county somehow saying that that's happening. So, or the Ohio Attorney General's office, I'm sorry. Very good. Condition of property. This is a commonly made mistake right here. Probably one of the bigger, most common mistakes I see in contracts. Buyer has received the Ohio Residential Property Disclosure Form. On the bottom of a disclosure form, this is a purchase agreement, but on the bottom of a disclosure, you'll see an initial and a date. This purchase agreement is going to relate to that property disclosure of when it was filled out. So you do not fill out today's date. You fill out when that property disclosure was actually filled out, and you type in that date specifically. Line 179 is buyer has not received the property disclosure. I'm assuming that they probably, we usually do have those. They're attached to the MLS, but if they have not, you would just check that off, and then you would have the buyer actually have like 5 days to actually fill that in. I'm sorry, the seller to fill in the property disclosure within 5 days and the buyer to initial and sign it. Line 188, representations and disclaimers. It's very important that we always write in line 195, none. We never want any in there, so none. What this is let's say you are selling a house. A client could write in here or ask you to write in here, you know, Eric told me that the house could be zoned commercial when it's residential. And if they wrote that in there, I would be obligated to make sure that it is actually residential, or we could get sued. I'm sorry, it could be converted to commercial. So always, always, always have none in here. I've had that literally in the last 16 years. I've had nothing but none. But that's what that is there for. If they're relying upon you saying that there's oil under the ground and they're going to drill and make a bunch of money on the oil. I'm giving you crazy examples, but you get the point. You know, it even talks about square footage, zoning, lot dimensions. They're saying if the buyer is expressly saying that they're buying it just because the MLS said it was 4,000 square feet, then they would write in here, the MLS said 4,000 square feet. That's why I'm buying it. Never, ever have anything in there. It puts you out for a lot of liability. Quickly, we've got damage. Pretty simple. If a tree falls on the house between the time of contract and before the filing date or title transfer, if there's under 10% of damage, the seller must either repair the house to its previous condition or pay the buyer the insurance money. Or option two is if it's over 10% in damage, then pretty much it's a null and void contract. The buyer and seller can proceed if they want, but they can renegotiate the deal at that point. Electronic data security. Keller Williams is not responsible for any electronic data security. If you get hacked on your own computer, there's nothing we can do about that. By the way, we're having more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? I would say fraud in the industry, where people are sending checks to incorrect people. They're getting random text messages. They're getting into people's emails and noticing they're buying a house. All of a sudden they are asking for checks to be wired or wire transfers to happen. Make sure you're telling your clients ahead of time. If they are getting anything like that, any odd text or email, call you directly. And before they send any money, call the title company, not from the email that they're getting or from the text. They need to call the title company directly. You need to call the title company directly that you have on file and say, is this the actual filing number? We just had somebody out of our Rocky River office have something that looked really legitimate, an email, and it even had the title company's name on it and everything. And that buyer ended up sending out their entire life savings that they were going to buy their house with to some party overseas, and they never saw that money again. Tens of thousands of dollars. So again, and they'll make it sound real urgent, like, hey, if you don't get this money over, we're not going to file and your moving's going to be canceled. We've been trying to reach you, you know, all of that stuff. So tell your client never, ever, ever, ever wire money without contacting you directly first. All right, moving on. Binding agreement, really important that your clients, now more than ever, it's a really odd market where buyers are having buyer remorse and a seller is possibly going, well, I don't know if I want to sell because I can't buy anything. Mr. Seller, once you sign this, Mr. Buyer, once you sign this, you are completely under contract. That's it. This is a legal binding agreement. Line 220, addenda. Remember, addenda is the plural form of addendum. There is no such thing as addendums. But we do want to add in here anything that we're attaching. So we're going to definitely have an agency disclosure, Ohio residential property disclosure. If you have a VA buyer, you're going to have a VA addendum. If you have a FHA buyer, you're going to have an FHA addendum. If you have a condo, there's a condominium addendum. There's a condominium acknowledgement. There is a walkthrough addendum, a house sale contingency addendum, a house sale concurrency addendum, lead-based paint, affiliated business disclosure, or any other. Let's say you have a septic addendum describing, we have that in our loop. So you can describe exactly what those addendas are, and we need addenda are, and you have to actually type those in here. So I would just put in, you know, septic addendum. You could also put in here blank addendum. There you can have blank addendum A. So you just put in here blank addendum A, or even addendum. I can type here addendum A, and maybe you write in addendum A. Remember, if we're typing in more than 1 to 2 sentences, we are practicing law. So we are just typing in seller to remove oil can from the backyard, right? We don't want to have, if this happens, then that happens, and have this long paragraph. That's practicing law. All right, deposit receipt. Make sure you have in here your deposit receipt if it's a check or a note. We already talked about that. And who has it? So is it the escrow agent or the broker? Now, at our office, we always want to send that to the escrow agent title company. We do not want to keep that at our brokerage. Remember, if earnest money is more than $10,000, it must be wired. You cannot collect a check. I'm recommending wires or going direct to the title company to pay online like we talked about before, even under 10,000, but that's a state law now. A lot of times agents think they should put their name in here. You do not put your name in here unless you are agreeing that you have that money in your hands, right? So that you actually have that physical check. So do not write that until you have that check in your hands, because you're saying that you have it. Line 236, you go ahead and type in your commission. So we do not know when we're making an offer on a listing, we don't know what the listing agreement is. So we just write in what the MLS has. And normally that's going to be 3% or 3 and 2. If that's the case, you'd put 3% on the first 100,000, 2% thereafter. There we go. And then over here, we just do 3/2. Line 238, per listing agreement. We, again, don't know what that listing agent has, but we do want to make sure that they do get their commission. And then you type in whatever company they are. So ABC, another Keller Williams office, whatever you have. Make sure you put buyer. If you're on the buyer side, you just assign the buyer signatures, seller over down here. You fill in the selling agent. Again, selling agent's buyer, listing agent is seller. And make sure you're filling in your license number, all of this. On the buyer side, if you're ever looking for our brokerage number, here it is. So if you ever need to reference that, a title company may ask you for that, or you might have to fill that in for a HUD deal. You can always reference it right there. And don't forget, even though there's signatures on this page, your client should sign at the bottom, or I'm sorry, initial at the bottom of it. Listing agent information, you don't have to. I recommend doing it. Take 5 minutes and fill in the most that you can from the MLS on the listing side. And that's about it. So any questions on the purchase agreement? We actually made it with 3 minutes left here.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So on the MLS, will it tell you what addendums are going to be needed?
So on the MLS, there may be attached addenda, but it won't say specifically. Sometimes a bank-owned property will say see attached addenda, and they have their own addenda they want. You will, though, always have, you can write this down, agency disclosure, property disclosure, lead-based paint disclosure. You will need a consumer guide signed, as we all know, but that's not attached to the contract. That's just between us and the client, so you don't send that over. I recommend a walkthrough addendum, and then an FHA or a VA addendum, depending on if they are an FHA or VA buyer. That should get the majority of what you need. And then again, if there's a unique circumstance where somebody has to remove something from it, remove something from the house or anything like that, that's the only time you would attach any other. But yeah, each
Okay.
house is going to be a little bit different, but I wouldn't say it's coming from the listing agent. That's mainly up to you on what you want, which ones you want. But there are some mandated forms like property disclosures.
Okay.
Great question. Anything else?
Eric, can you repeat the date for line 16 under the secondary offer? I was watching the
Yeah.
baby at the time.
That's okay. So that date right there, that is how long your offer is good for,
Okay.
right? So let's say we make an offer today on June 24th.
Mhm.
I don't want to put a date. Maybe I'll give till July 9th. And then if that client, if the primary contract is still in place by July 9th, my buyer's released from the secondary offer. Long story short, you just got to make sure your buyer's okay with not offering on any other homes until that date is up, or they are okay with buying multiple homes,
Oh,
right? Because they're under contract, meaning if they find a better home tomorrow,
right.
they can't do anything until July 9th with that other home.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very good.
Great question.
Thank you.
Any others? How's it going, guys?
Nope, helpful. I've seen someone go through this before, and just there's always a couple of other little tidbits that you pick up. So yeah. It's,
Very good. Well, yeah, practice. My recommendation, take these and do them like 5 times. If you write these out 5 times, once a day, you're welcome to email them to me. I can review them and take a look and get back to you. Give me some time. It'll usually takes about 24 hours for me to review them. But once you do that 5 times in a row, you're going to know exactly what you need to do. So why don't we wrap this up with, go ahead and type in the number of how confident you are now in the purchase agreement. Many of you had 1s and 2s. Some of you are up to 7, but go ahead and type that in. Great. We got 6, we got 8, we got 8, we got 8, we got 6, we got 6. Another 6. Perfect. So I'm glad to hear we got rid of all those lower numbers. And remember, if you do this like 5 days in a row, just handwrite them out, send them to me. I can take a look at them if you want. It's going to make life a lot easier when that first buyer comes to you and says, hey, we want to write an offer. All right.
thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. We are right on time at 2 o'clock. So enjoy your day. Keep up these, your first deal. I hope this was helpful for everyone. And yeah, we'll see everyone soon.